Have you ever wondered why some people can walk into a room and immediately shift the energy? They don't shout, they don't posture, they don't even need to speak. And yet, everyone adjusts. Conversations soften, aggression fades, attention shifts. These people hold something you were never taught, something that makes manipulators back off, narcissists panic, and attention seekers fall silent. Before we unpack how to develop this psychological weapon, hit subscribe, because you're about to gain a level of emotional control most people never reach. This is the most dangerous skill no one ever taught you. Strategic emotional detachment. It's not coldness. It's not apathy. It's not about not feeling. It's about mastering when and how you respond. Most people are puppets pulled by the strings of their emotions, reacting to criticism, exploding when provoked, explaining themselves to anyone who questions them. But the moment you learn to sit in silence, not out of fear, but out of control, everything changes. People are used to controlling you through your reactions, through your need to be understood, through your impulse to explain. But when you stop playing that game, when you stop giving them the emotional feedback they rely on, you become unreadable. And unreadable is untouchable. This is why the most emotionally dangerous people don't threaten. They simply observe. They let others speak. They let people show their hand. And when they respond, it's deliberate, controlled. Often they don't respond at all. And that silence, that pause, that lack of predictable behavior, it terrifies people who are used to pulling strings. Strategic detachment is not about hiding who you are. It's about refusing to be hijacked by people who benefit from your emotional chaos. And make no mistake, many people do. Your overreaction is their camouflage. Your defensiveness is their distraction. But when you become still, precise, and quiet, you remove the one thing they need to manipulate you: access. To master emotional detachment, you need to start with one simple but brutal truth. Not everything deserves your attention. The world is full of bait. Comments designed to provoke you, people addicted to your reactions, and situations engineered to drain your energy. The first shift is to stop thinking you owe a response to every stimulus. You don't. Most people live in reaction mode. Someone insults them, they explain. Someone accuses them, they defend. Someone misunderstands them, they scramble to correct the narrative. This is not communication, it's energetic slavery. And the ones who know how to pull your strings will never stop pulling as long as you keep dancing. Start by identifying your emotional triggers. What phrases, tones, or situations make you feel like you have to prove yourself? What accusations make you want to speak up just to be seen as good or kind or strong? These are not moments of clarity. They're traps. And every time you take the bait, you hand someone else the remote control to your nervous system. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you feel on your terms. You choose the time, the place, the depth. You don't let guilt, fear, or pressure dictate when you open your emotional vault. That's power. That's control. And once you stop feeding every fire, you start to notice something. Who gets upset when you become still? Who gets agitated when you don't immediately reply? Who accuses you of being distant or difficult just because you've stopped performing emotional labor for them? That's your map. That's how you locate the people who were never there for you, only for what you gave them. Your silence makes people confront their own noise. Your detachment exposes their dependency. And your restraint forces them to face something they've spent years avoiding: themselves. The moment you stop being predictable, you become powerful. Predictability is what manipulators rely on. They know you'll get defensive. They know you'll over-explain. They know you'll fold just to keep the peace. But when you break that cycle, they panic. Not because you've hurt them, but because you've stopped giving them control. Control isn't always about domination. Sometimes it's about subtle influence, making you question yourself, pushing you to stay emotionally accessible, convincing you that your worth is tied to your responsiveness. Emotional detachment severs that illusion. It makes you sovereign again. Start by delaying your response. When something triggers you, wait. Let the urge pass. Don't respond from the wound. Respond from the center. And if you don't have access to that center in the moment, don't respond at all. Your silence will teach people how much of their behavior depended on your instant reaction. People who are addicted to controlling others interpret silence as aggression. That's not your problem. That's a sign that they never respected your boundaries to begin with. You're not being distant. You're being disciplined. Discipline is the foundation of detachment. You can't just hope to be calm when pressured. You train for it. You observe your patterns. You create distance. And most importantly, you learn to value your peace more than your performance. Because the real war isn't out there. It's internal. The fight to not react. The fight to stay composed. The fight to not give away your power just to feel seen. And once you win that war, you stop living for the validation of others. You stop explaining your silence. And the world learns. You're not someone to be moved by noise. You move when you decide. There's something deeply unsettling about someone who doesn't flinch. Someone who isn't swayed by guilt, praise, or pressure. They're unreadable, and in a world obsessed with reaction, being unreadable is terrifying. You become a mirror. People don't see you. They see themselves reflected back. Their insecurity, their control tactics, their emotional dependency, all of it comes to the surface when there's nothing left to manipulate. And that's why emotional detachment is feared. Because it forces people to sit with their own discomfort. Your silence becomes a filter. It separates the ones who respected you from the ones who just wanted access. The ones who respected your energy will honor your boundaries. The others will throw tantrums, guilt trips, and accusations. Let them. Every reaction exposes intention. And you don't need to respond to expose someone. You just need to stop giving them what they took for granted. Emotional detachment rewrites your internal code. You no longer see distance as rejection. You see it as protection. You no longer see silence as weakness. You see it as strategy. You stop trying to be understood and start focusing on being aligned. Aligned with your peace, your standards, your intuition. Most people are stuck in emotional survival mode, over-explaining, over-apologizing, overextending. You step out of that cycle the moment you realize you don't owe the world constant access to your emotional bandwidth. You have the right to protect your space without guilt. You have the right to respond on your own time or not at all. And most importantly, you have the right to be at peace without performing for it. This is what they don't teach you. Because a person who doesn't need validation is dangerous to anyone who profits from your insecurity. A mind that doesn't react is a mind that's dangerous. Not because it's cold or unfeeling, but because it's trained. Trained to observe instead of absorb, to evaluate instead of obey, to act with precision instead of panic. And that's what makes you untouchable. Not your strength, not your volume, but your restraint. Most people want to be heard, but power doesn't come from being heard. It comes from being remembered. And the ones who are remembered are those who don't waste words. They don't spill emotion recklessly. They don't trade energy for attention. They know exactly what their presence is worth. and they don't hand it out like a coupon. When you become emotionally disciplined, people may call you distant. Good. Let them. Let them misunderstand your silence as arrogance, your calm as coldness, your absence as weakness. Because those who truly understand power will recognize it for what it is. Control. Over yourself, over your time, over your reactions, over the room. This level of control doesn't come naturally. It's built through every moment you choose not to explain yourself. Every time you decide not to reply. Every time you walk away without slamming a door. That's where real dominance lives. In what you don't say, in what you no longer give, in the boundaries you don't negotiate. You don't need to be loud to be felt. You just need to stop leaking energy. Because once you become unavailable to chaos, the chaos stops looking for you. And that's when people realize you were never the one who needed them. They needed you. Most people are obsessed with being liked. They shapeshift, overextend, and dilute themselves for the approval of people who wouldn't notice if they disappeared. That's the trap. And emotional detachment is how you break it. When you stop caring about how you're perceived, you become more real. You stop performing. You stop adjusting your truth to fit someone else's comfort zone. That alone makes you powerful in a world full of masks. Because now, you're not seeking permission to exist. You're deciding who gets the privilege of access. This shift doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you precise. You move differently when your self-worth is no longer on trial. You engage because you want to, not because you need to be validated. You walk away because it's your standard, not because you're trying to prove anything. Watch how quickly the dynamics around you change when you live like that. Watch who falls off. Watch who gets louder. Watch who tries to bait you back into being reactive, predictable, soft. And then watch how little it affects you. That's the win. Not louder, not tougher, just unfazed. The most dangerous skill you'll ever learn is to stay calm while the world expects you to break. Because when you stop giving people access to your emotional switches, they stop thinking they can control the light. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself so clearly that misunderstanding no longer threatens you. There comes a moment when emotional detachment becomes something else entirely. Not just a skill, but a lifestyle. A code you live by. A filter that decides who and what gets your energy without apology. You start to move different, slower, but more intentional. You listen more, speak less. And when you do speak, it hits harder. Not because it's louder, but because it's rare. Your presence starts to carry weight, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're no longer chasing anything. You've learned how to hold your own energy instead of spilling it for attention, approval, or temporary comfort. People feel the shift. Some respect it, some resent it. The ones who feel entitled to your constant availability will always take your silence personally. Let them. You're not here to ease everyone's insecurity. You're here to protect your own peace. This doesn't make you unkind. It makes you clear. And clarity is intimidating. When people are used to confusion, they can control. That's why emotional detachment is so powerful. Because it removes the leverage others once had over you. When you no longer need to explain, defend, or prove, you become impossible to manipulate. This part of the journey is quiet. There are no big announcements, no dramatic exits, just a steady removal of anything that drains you. And in its place, space. Space to think, to rebuild, to remember who you are when no one is pulling at your energy. And once you taste that kind of stillness, that kind of inner freedom, you'll never trade it for approval again. At some point, you stop asking for closure. You stop expecting apologies. You stop needing people to understand your decisions. Why? Because you realize the peace you've built is worth more than the explanations you're owed. Emotional detachment teaches you to stop negotiating your peace for conversations that go nowhere. You don't chase clarity from chaos. You don't reopen doors just to prove you could have walked through them differently. You let silence be the period where others expect a paragraph. This isn't about being right. It's about being done. Being done with overthinking, with emotional chasing, with people who only show up to drain and disappear. You stop returning to the fire that burned you just to prove you can survive it again. That's not strength. That's self-abandonment. And now, you've outgrown it. You've outgrown your old habits of emotional availability. You've outgrown your own desire to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You've outgrown the performance of peace just to avoid someone else's discomfort. There's power in becoming the person who no longer reacts. Not because you don't feel, but because you've finally learned that not everything is worthy of your energy. Detachment gave you distance, and distance gave you perspective. You're not cold. You're calibrated. Now, your silence isn't empty. It's full of everything you used to give away for free. When you finally stop being emotionally accessible to everyone, your entire world restructures. People who thrived on your open-door policy suddenly feel unwelcome. Not because you closed the door in anger, but because you finally realized it didn't lead anywhere worth going. Your detachment creates discomfort for others, not for you. Because now you understand that your energy isn't a public resource. It's sacred, selective, strategic. And not everyone is entitled to witness your growth, your healing, or your peace. You'll notice who respected you and who only respected your access. The ones who vanish when you stop overextending weren't your loss. They were your lesson. And the lesson is this: people don't value what's always available. They value what's earned. That's why emotional detachment is feared. Not because it's cold, but because it breaks cycles. Cycles where you used to chase, explain, justify. Now you simply observe. You let people reveal themselves without interference. And when they do, you don't react. You decide. You decide what stays, what goes, what drains, what builds. Your energy is no longer on autopilot. It's directed, guarded, and grounded. And that control doesn't just change your relationships. It changes your identity. You're no longer the one they can push and pull. You're the one they have to earn. That shift, it's not just growth. It's arrival. There's a kind of silence that only the powerful understand. It's not avoidance. It's not fear. It's the sound of someone who no longer needs to explain, perform, or defend who they are. That silence is the final form of self-respect. When you get to this level, things become simple. You don't argue where you used to. You don't chase what collapses on its own. You don't mourn what you walked away from. Not because you've become hard, but because you've become whole. Emotional detachment doesn't strip away your humanity. It sharpens it. It makes your compassion intentional, your presence valuable, your time sacred. You no longer spill energy into places that return it empty. You no longer beg to be seen in rooms that only value your silence when it's useful to them. You show up on your terms. You speak only when it adds weight. And your absence? It becomes a message, a boundary, a final answer. This is what they don't expect, that you would survive without the approval, that you would evolve without the applause, that you would detach, not to escape, but to reclaim everything you gave away for free. You're not who you were at the start of this journey. You're not reactive. You're not open by default. You're not performing. You're present. You're precise. And most importantly, you're free.